welcome back to my channel, Chronically Chlo. I am Chloe, a 28-year-old single mother living with polycystic kidney disease. For today's video, I am going to talk about day one of my transplant evaluations. I will be honest, I kind of struggled a little bit to put together this next video. I have filmed kind of a couple different versions, I would say, and a few different segments kind of during day one of my transplant evaluations, and then after, kind of with my thoughts, and also before, leading up, going into the transplant evaluations and kind of what they were going to look like, and then part of like my lab work, but nothing kind of went according to plan. And then my brain was very scrambled after probably like the most exhausting day, both mentally and physically, being there from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And it's funny because everybody told me like, it's gonna be a really long day. And I was just like, no big deal, whatever. Like, I've worked longer days than that. And I was just totally beat and could not think straight by the time I left. So I'm gonna kind of try my best to walk back through it and give my somewhat processed feelings so far, and then also update on kind of where my function is at now as of my most recent labs, and then kind of update on some of the other labs that I had done. I still have another day next week of more lab testing and an echocardiogram, and then also an ultrasound, and then another appointment with, I think, a psychologist for the transplant team. And then the day after that, which I think is Thursday, the panel will meet to discuss my case for the final, like adding onto the list for transplant. But my day with the transplant team started out at 7 a.m. with a lab draw. I had to be there 7 a.m. So I had got up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I filmed a little bit that morning, waking up and getting up and ready to go for the day. I include that here. Good morning. Welcome back to my channel. It's 5:09 a.m. and I just woke up. It's day one of my transplant evaluations. I have a river here. I have to be at the transplant center at 7 a.m. So I need to get up and get ready, shower really quick, and leave here about 6:30 to get down there and get checked in. Just my start to the day. Had to be there at 7 a.m. I was running late because my mom, you have to bring your care partner with you through the whole thing so that they know that you have essentially a support team in place for transplant. My mom, who I was her care partner for her transplant, is now going to be my care partner for my transplant, which is somewhat funny to everybody in the transplant clinic because they know us already. But she was running late, so I had to leave without her. It is like 6:55 and still dark out. I am running late because my mom, who is my care partner and is supposed to be going with me, thought we needed to leave at 7, not that I needed to be there at 7. So I had to leave my house without her. But luckily, they said on my form that she didn't need to be with me for my labs and EKG and chest x-ray. So she's gonna meet me at 8 a.m. afterwards in the transplant clinic. But she should know because she's been through this transplant screening process like multiple times. So she should be the expert on what time we have to arrive for this stuff. And she had to meet me there. So I was running late and got there, I think, like 7:10, 7:15. So my day started with blood draws. They took 16 vials of blood, and the
can't remember, the lab lady was like laughing at me because it's like, this is a whole lot of blood to take from somebody who has not been allowed to eat or drink anything for like 12 hours. It seems a little unfair. And she thought I was being a baby about it. But I tend to get dizzy sometimes with lab draws and needle pricks. So
it is like, see, this tube only has a
16 vials of blood, and then I had an EKG for your heart. And then after that, I had a chest x-ray to ensure like I don't have anything going on in my lungs. Then after that, I had to be up in the transplant clinic. I thought that those 3 things initially were not going to take very long, and I would have kind of more time to like get breakfast at Starbucks afterwards or just down the hall and like kind of catch up from running late. And it did not. They took way longer than I anticipated. And I ended up running behind and getting to the transplant clinic like a few minutes right after I was supposed to be there to meet with my transplant coordinator. So then I got to the transplant clinic and checked in, had to fill out forms and go through essentially like a frailty test where they ensured that I was able to like squeeze a certain number of pounds, which sounds weird. You have to like squeeze this thing and it tells you how strong your hands are. I don't understand that. And then my mom had to do it too to ensure like she would be able to like help me after, or have the strength to care for me after surgery. And then we had our 2-hour, it's like an hour and a half long class for transplant education, which I had been through before with my mom. So it was the exact same education, has not changed a bit, which it's good information, good statistics. I think now they've updated some of the data because last time I had gone through it with my mom was in 2019, the beginning of 2019. Her transplant was January 2019. And so the data that I got in that class was a little bit outdated as of today. So in Nebraska, I believe now the wait list is about 3 years, and I was under the assumption that it was 2 years. But people who wait on the waiting list for like a cadaver kidney or a deceased person's kidney. But typically somebody who has like a living donor or a family member willing to donate from them or for them, they are able to transplant like 2 to 4 months after being listed is typically how long that process takes, which is still incredibly a short amount of time, even the 3 years, because it's like in some other states people wait on the list for 7 years. And so in that aspect, regardless of where my numbers are, regardless of what path I have to go down with it, I feel blessed to be in Nebraska where our numbers are waitlist time and just the data is kind of a lot better than in some other states, like on either of the coasts. So after that education, I started the just really long meetings with everybody. And this I thought was going to be a lot easier, and it was very draining. So after the education, I then met with my transplant coordinator again, just to like review some forms that essentially were like what I would call it like an intent to proceed. But it essentially was a form that you sign. It's called an evaluation acknowledgement, kidney or pancreas transplant, that essentially like weighs out all of the risks, saying what the percentages of like likelihood of success are, and that you understand all of these risks and what the procedures are essentially. And you sign that along with another form that kind of lists all of the different categories and different criteria that goes into transplants. And so those are a few things. And then you have to sign, so with your donor options, there's a few different kinds of donation pairing that you can choose whether or not you want to be open to. So one of those is a KDPI of 85 or above. So this is essentially like a percentage match of, well, I'm not explaining that the best. So essentially like a kidney viability gets a score, and the score 0 to 85 is like more likely to succeed. Above 85 is like, it may still succeed or be a long-lasting kidney, but it's just the score is not as good on it, and so it's like got this less likely score. So you can choose whether or not you want to be open to these higher scoring kidneys as a donor option if you were to be waiting for a cadaver kidney. I chose not to be open to the higher scoring kidneys just because, speaking with the nurse practitioner, all of the people involved in my case, because I'm young and I have a very long life to live, or I assume that I have a lot of years left, taking a kidney that has a higher score essentially would mean that it has a less likelihood of lasting as long as a lower score kidney would. So therefore, if I am able to match with a lower scoring kidney, there's more of a chance of that kidney lasting 20 years instead of maybe like 10 on a higher scoring kidney. So that would eliminate the possibility of me needing another transplant, or maybe even one more after that. And that's kind of one of the things that I'm most nervous about, is if I have this transplant so young, I'm more than likely going to need a second transplant at some point. So that was one option. And then another one is like hepatitis C kidney. So you can choose to get a hepatitis C kidney, and then after transplant, then they treat you for hepatitis. So then you're cured of hepatitis, but you were essentially exposed to and given hepatitis by having this transplant. And so also, again, I chose no, I don't want to have that. They're just a bunch of different weird donor things. One of the things they look at when pairing kidneys is whether or not you have these antibodies in your system. So these antibodies essentially make it so I'm a blood type B. If you don't have a large number of these antibodies in your system, then you're able to be paired with an A-type kidney. The scale is that they want to have less than 16 count of antibodies in your blood when they test it, and my antibodies were 128. Which means that unfortunately, being a blood type B, I will not be able to be paired with a different blood type donor kidney because my antibodies are like off the chart high. They think that you build up these antibodies essentially from like having children, because it's like having a foreign body in your body, and your body builds up these antibodies to like fight against it essentially. So unfortunately, having those high number of antibodies means that limits my donor options a little bit. So that was one of the interesting things that I learned. Another thing was that in all of my blood labs, they of course ran like a bunch of crazy different tests to make sure that I'm healthy and that I don't have any infections and stuff like that, but then also to recheck my kidney function to see where I was at as of that day. So I had hit 19, and then that was the lowest, of course, I had ever hit. My nephrologist at my last appointment had hoped that my function would go back up a little bit and I would plateau off. and stay there for a little bit since I had been at 30% for so long. And I did. My function went, so I hit 19 and then I went up a little bit at my last lab, back to 23, but because I had hit 19, they still qualify you for transplant and continue moving forward regardless, because you've already hit that threshold and they know that you're likely to dip back down again. And I did, according to that day's labs, my function had dropped back down a little bit lower to 18. And my creatinine, another thing they measure to see what your kidney function is at, had went up to 3.1. So that wasn't exactly the news that I wanted, but it is what it is. Hopefully it'll pop back up a little bit more. I can get, maybe I was just dehydrated. I don't know. It seems like my transplant or my labs seem to fluctuate really crazy, because I was at 30 and then I went to 22 and then I went to 19 and then I went to 23 and now I'm back down to 18. So I seem to bounce around a lot. And I had been at like roughly 30 for so many years. I just can't seem to find a new number. So after signing a bunch of consent forms, discussing different donor options, and reviewing a bunch of my lab work with the transplant coordinator, then I met with the pharmacist, which there are 2 pharmacists, to discuss kind of what medications I'm on currently and then what medications I would be on post-transplant, and whether or not any of those would mix or cause each other issues. My biggest thing right now is I have been, because of the size of my kidneys, in pain management for years. I've been in a pain management program now for like 4 or 5 years almost, I think. And I don't like it. I hate it. I honestly think it's one of the worst decisions that I've ever made. And so I've been working to get off of that with my pain doctor, because my goal is to work to decrease and come off of all of those medications that I've taken for years before transplant, because my fear is that I'll get to transplant, and because I built up a tolerance to these medications and I've been on them for so many years, that I won't be able to have any pain control post-transplant, and that will lead to a whole onslaught of other issues. So my goal, which everybody is on board for, and I've already gotten halfway there over the past year, is to come off of all of these medications, regardless of the day-to-day pain that they cause me or that it causes me, because I think the long-term effect that they cause on my health otherwise is greater than what I'm dealing with. So that led into some other stuff, but they will, in my case, be bringing on, it sounds like, instead of just having like an anesthesiologist and then like a surgeon and everybody handling my pain control or pain medications for transplant, would also bring on like the pain medicine department at the hospital to handle, because of the history that I've had with my cysts and surgeries and stuff like that. So I requested, if possible, not to have a steroid program or program post-transplant that includes a steroid. Not everybody's really on board with that, but we'll figure out kind of how to either be on a very low dose or no dose at all. That's my goal, because I don't like the idea of being on a steroid. I'm a high-strung person already. The bodily side effects that steroids cause terrify me. So I would like to avoid long-term use of a steroid if possible. And then after the pharmacist that I met with, the dietitian came in. Again, I haven't never really, I mean, with polycystic kidney disease, you are supposed to follow a like no red meat, low sodium, low caffeine diet. I have never been good at that, because steak, Diet Coke, and all things salty are kind of my favorite. So they understandably probably have their work cut out for them with me. I don't have to be on a specialized diet because none of my levels for other stuff were kind of like out of control. I don't eat a lot because my stomach can't really expand because of the size of my kidneys. So I typically only eat one meal a day as it is. And so it's a high calorie meal at the end of the day after not eating all day. So my diet's a little wonky to begin with. I'm very scared as to what my diet will look like post-transplant when there's more room in my body if I have my kidneys removed. I'm a little afraid I'll go a little crazy eating afterwards. After pharmacy, I then saw, oh my gosh, who did I see? I saw, after pharmacy, I saw the dietitian. And after the dietitian, I had 2 phone calls because of COVID. These 2 appointments, they turned into phone calls to avoid, to help with the COVID cut downs, essentially. So first I talked to a financial counselor. So this was an interesting phone call. So they run your insurance to see what your benefits will cover as far as transplant. Part of transplant is also that they encourage, they don't require, but they encourage that you take out Medicare. Your Medicare acts as a second insurance, regardless of how old you are. So yes, I would be 28 or 29 when having a transplant, but would still need Medicare at that age. So it acts as a second insurance to help cover the cost or pick up the additional cost that your insurance doesn't. And then it also protects or helps if you have a living donor, it helps cover their expenses and kind of ensure any issues or like follow-up appointments from them donating to you for a number of years afterwards. So I think the cost of Medicare is like $125 or $130 a month, but then it really does make a difference. So this is in my case, the cost of the transplant before insurance is $175,000. That's insane. That is so much money. And then my insurance deductible, my out of pocket is $4,000, and then the other one, the out of pocket maximum or the total something is like $6,000. I'm terrible with insurance, which is funny because I've been dealing with it for so long. But so I have my 2 benefit maximums are like $4,000 and $6,000. So with the Medicare pickup, on top of whatever my insurance covers, my out-of-pocket for the transplant, this doesn't cover any additional weekly blood labs, home health care. You think about like medications or time off work and stuff like that after the transplant that is months of costs included. But so that like 3-4 days bare minimum would be like $1,500 out of pocket estimated as of right now. No, if that's like with no complications, which sounds like a bargain to me. But I was thinking about it, is that like I'll be the 4th person in my family to have a transplant at this hospital. So if you take into consideration inflation, then I think my mom said hers, like before any insurance payouts, it was like a low of like 200 or a little maybe more. We'll be nearing like $1 million in like transplant costs for this hospital. I think that I was like joking with the people that I deserve like a punch card or like this one half off because like the 4th one should be free. That's a lot of money. It's also a lot of transplants. So crazy, but also a little calming to know that I'm not going to get like a $30,000 bill at the end of it, I guess. Not that having to take time off work, not really have an income, get the medical bill, and then the cost of prescriptions and I mean, life still goes on. It's not like time stops and like everything pauses. So it's still financially a burden, regardless of how much insurance covers or doesn't cover. But so that was the financial counselor. And then I talked to a pharmacy financial counselor who told me what my prescriptions may or may not run after post-transplant. Those seemed manageable, hopefully, but who knows, because they really don't know for sure what I'll be on post-transplant until we get closer. So those were all my pre-lunch meetings and appointments and activity. By that point, I was already exhausted. I was literally like ready to crawl out of this room that we had been in practically all day. I was like ready to run. It was just a lot. So then we had an hour late lunch break before we had to be back to start meeting with the nurse practitioner and the surgeon and all of those fun people. So after lunch, which we just had lunch in the hospital because we only had an hour, we went back and met with the nurse practitioner at One, who did like a full health and physical on me. So I had to run through literally like my entire life's history worth of health and any surgeries and medical diagnoses that I've ever had. And then again, discuss like my labs and stuff like that with her. And then she did like an exam on me. And then I think after her is when the nephrologist came in. And again, same nephrologist or different nephrologist than I normally see, who is actually the head of like internal medicine, is my normal nephrologist. This nephrologist is purely for transplant nephrology. He came in and kind of dashed my dreams a little bit. So my nephrologist the entire time had been saying that at transplant we would take my kidneys out. If that was the plan, that is what we're gonna do. This nephrologist, the transplant nephrologist, was like, well, it's a whole lot more dangerous. It's a whole lot more surgery. You're in surgery for 9 hours because of when we take those kidneys out, all the fluid in your body shifts, your blood pressure drops. If the new kidney doesn't start working right away, then you don't have any backup function and you have to be on dialysis. And if you're not already on dialysis, then it's just, there's a whole lot more issues. So I'd prefer to put the new one in, even if there's not a whole lot of room. We'll figure out how to make room. That sounds miserable, by the way. And then go back in 2 months later and take the other ones out. So that's not what I want to do at all, especially because I'd have to essentially deal with more pain, and while trying to recover from the transplant, more pain because there's more stuff inside my body that does not fit. I already don't have room as it is. And then have another recover from another surgery. So the 2 months that I would be out for the transplant would then turn into like 4 months because I'd have another surgery and then have to recover from that on top of it. So I'd be down and out of work for even longer, and then additional medical bills on top of it. That's the way I look at it. It's more money and more time, and I don't want that. So I am advocating to do it all at once. And it was very boldly noted that that is what I would prefer to do. And I was told that in my panel discussion, they will note that and discuss it. I met with a social worker after I met with the nephrologist, who also knew my mom from her transplant and knew me from her transplant as well. And then when I met with the surgeon last, also had the same conversation. I do not want to have my kidneys taken out after my transplant. I want to do it all at once, because the whole point of this and the whole point of waiting to have my kidneys taken out at transplant was, I had the choice a year ago to have my kidneys taken out and go on dialysis. I waited to do it all at once so that I could last on the function that I have and not have to do multiple surgeries. this was the plan. This was the plan for years. And so I've kind of voiced my concerns and my opinions very adamantly to both the nephrologist and the surgeon, and they understand that I can't. My point is, I don't want to be in pain or on pain management anymore, and if you don't take my kidneys out and you put more in, then that prolongs that process. So we'll see, I guess. Funny bit is that the surgeon that is on my case is also the same surgeon that did my mother's transplant. And in our appointment, we were discussing something that had happened during my mom's post-transplant when she was in the hospital, and she got really sick, and that, like, a whole bunch of doctors had to come in, and he was there, and I was standing on a chair in the corner because there was no room for me while they were all working on her, and in the middle of my consult with the surgeon, we're talking about what happened in my mom's transplant. He goes, "Oh, yeah, that's right. You were there. You were in the corner." Like, it just like had hit him that that was me in the corner of the room while they were like working on her emergency style. And it was kind of funny that he like just hit him like at that moment, like, oh my God, that's the same person. Yeah. So a lot of similar people essentially that were all on my mom's case are all on my case, which is, again, probably a first for them to have this whole family go through, essentially all under 2 years, to have multiple transplants within the same family. But so that was my day one of transplant evaluations. By the end of it, I was literally so tired. In my social work, which I saw the social worker in between the nephrologist and the surgeon, and they ask like all about your family and do you have a support system, and like just these really weird kind of personal questions, which is fine. I get it, whatever. But I was literally like nodding, falling asleep because I was just so exhausted. I felt like mentally drained. By the time I left to go walk to my car, I was just, my brain was scrambled. I couldn't think straight. I was ready to like get home and just see my kids and forget that the day had happened. I was so tired. So that was day one. I still have a whole nother day next week. I'm not really looking forward to it after going through all of this on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving Wednesday. It wiped me out. I was so tired. I literally exhausted Wednesday evening, and then after we had a small family like household meal for lunch on Thanksgiving Thursday, I laid in bed the entire day and just, I felt like I had ran a marathon. Mentally and physically, it beat me up. I tried to film a video Wednesday night when I got home from the transplant evaluations, in between like getting ready for the next day and doing stuff with my kids, and I will throw some of that in, but I just probably sounded crazy in it because I could not think straight, literally. Hi, welcome back. It is 8:30 at night, and it is the end of the day on day one of my transplant evaluations. My original plan, 99% sure, you can probably hear my kids yelling in the background. So this has been kind of my put together of day one of my transplant evaluations. This is a really long video and I apologize. I appreciate everybody who has commented, liked, or subscribed so far, and thanks for sticking with me if you've stuck through this video so far. I will update you guys after next week, after day 2 of my evaluations and how those go. Hoping to kind of get another update on my labs again. I think I'm getting them redrawn Wednesday. If not, I have one more set of labs I have to do for my other nephrologist, my normal nephrologist, and I want to recheck my kidney and function again in a few weeks and see if it's changed at all, because another drop just makes me nervous. I would like to avoid dialysis if at all possible, and my numbers trending downwards again gives me anxiety on what I'm doing wrong to create that issue continuously. So again, thanks for watching. Keep an eye out for upcoming videos, and I will see you soon.